This week on the show, we're delighted to be joined by James Gerrard Jones. Now, James is a photo agent from a very prestigious agency, Wyatt Clarke Jones, which many of our photographer listeners out there will have heard of. And if you haven't heard of the agency itself, you will definitely have heard of some of their photographers, because some of them have actually been guests on this very show. Sophie Bard comes to mind, who we had on last year or the year before, quite a few episodes ago now. I think it was the year before last. And yeah, we're really happy that you could come on, James, because both myself and Tom have seen you speak at various industry events over the years, and we both independently have thought, which when we were discussing this, we kind of mentioned, your name came up, and we both kind of independently said, "Oh yeah, I've seen James talk," and he was actually really, really helpful, very insightful, somebody who didn't feel too much like a gatekeeper, somebody who had experience and was willing to share it. So you immediately came to mind as somebody we should have on the show. So thank you for joining us. I guess to start with, we want to kind of get a bit of background on your kind of journey into becoming a photo agent, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Sure, no problem. Well, hi, Greg, hi, Tom. Thanks for inviting us along. So my personal background, I studied photography. So I studied photography, left uni, came to London with my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now. We're still together. And I started sort of studio assisting. So I knew I wanted to be in photography. I kind of think I knew I didn't want to be a freelance photographer. I had a passion for photography, but for all sort of different, my interest was just super broad, and in arts generally, just really broad. So, a job came up quite quickly with the National Geographic collection. So I ended up joining a library for a spell, and then I worked in another library. So that all the junctions for me were just following, I guess, income possibilities, but connected to having a passion for photography. And within 3 years of that, a job came up with John Wyatt Clarke, who founded the agency that is Wyatt Clarke and Jones now. And yes, it was a real eureka moment for me, because I think up until that point, I'd sort of had I'd separated my passion for photography with what was possible in terms of a career in commercial photography at that time. And so we're going back a long way. It's like 25 years ago. And John, even at that point, had an amazing company with some incredible photographers. And it was, for me, it was a sort of a penny drop moment of like, wow, it's possible to have both, for these photographers who make work that you could really care about and you feel is important, and you could be, you could love this work. And it was also commercially viable. And not only that, it was that little company was almost making that possible. And that was, it was just super exciting thing to be part of. So I came into that when it was already established, but it was a tiny company. It was just John and his wife working at the time, and joined in 2003, 2006. John took a step away from agenting to become a lecturer. So that's when we partnered up, and I sort of took over running the company with an amazing team. We've got an incredible team now. We've always had amazing people working with us. So it's been like that. So it's been 20 years of that. So amazing. That's the story. But really, just you haven't asked me on here because of me at all. It's definitely the company. So just to tell your listeners a bit more about Wyatt Clarke Jones, who we are, what we do, and how we do it. So as an agency, what John founded was quite unique at the time. It was he'd been working at Magnum, and he'd set up with 3 documentary photographers and was working with them, representing them into the advertising sector. So that was David Moore, Paul Rees, Simon Norfolk, at the core really of what he was doing. And then Adam Hinton, who we still represent. Adam came a little bit later. But yes, so that was really, that's a thread that the company has that is still really vitally important to us. And I think it's that we're not sort of commercial agents we don't represent commercial photographers. It's not about sort of ticking boxes in different sections, having a food photographer, a landscape photographer, a still life photographer. What we're really about as an agency is finding photographers who are exciting and have something to say with their work. They've got a really active practice and an active life in photography. And then we're working with that and trying to make it as commercially supportive to their career as it possibly can be. Um, so that's that's I guess the story of us, and that's for your listeners. I think that's why we get invited to talk at things like this, and to we do a lot with students as well, lots of grassroots work. So for us, it's we're all from arts backgrounds. Everyone who's ever worked with the agency really has probably either studied photography, history of art, could be illustration, it could be, but they've got a passion for the arts, and that's the real reason that they're there. And it's supporting the work of photographers we really care about. So that's kind of the next thing. It's we're out there trying to find the people who we feel. It's not representing the people who are there already and making a buck. It's actually finding the people whose work we really care about and we believe should be getting the jobs and should be supported so they can be photographers. And it's working with them, and it's helping to make it possible. So that's why it's so rewarding for all of us that work there, really. So,
okay, well, that's a really interesting kind of background of what you do. I guess to bring us up to speed to present day. I mean, how are things at the moment? Where do we find ourselves in 2025? Because I think a lot of photographers out there have had a kind of rocky few years, and so it's always interesting, somebody like yourself and the amount of jobs and pictures that you're seeing coming over the desk for various photographers. How does the industry look to you at the moment? And how's it different from when you started as well, back in 2003?
Yeah, no, definitely. So it's definitely it's a challenging time, but I think I would probably want to separate that from photography, because I think there's a few things going on at the moment. And I think we've actually seen this before. So I don't want to sort of model my approach to answering this, but I guess the simple way to start is it's a really difficult time. But then it is a really difficult time for most sectors, I think, at the moment. It's we've had Brexit, we had COVID, we've had wars, we've had all sorts of massive shifts globally in what's going on. We've got now trade wars and tariffs. There's just endless uncertainty, an enormous amount of debt, and there's economically, the UK particularly is in a really, really tricky spot. So,
that's a very generous way of saying it. We're in a pretty bad spot, right?
Well, I think it's a pretty bad spot, isn't it? I think it's the ad agencies we work with, there's always going to be photographers who've got the work and who are busy, and there's always going to be ad agencies who are mopping up the work more in relation to others. So there's always going to be people doing well, and I think what you can do is beat yourself up with that. You can be like, well, how come if Uncommon, the agency, are flying, why is our ad agency not flying? But the difference between the good times and the more difficult times, I think, is the work sort of tends to retreat to the kind of the absolute cream, the very best of everything. Those people will take all the work that there is and hold on to it. Whereas I think in times where work's flowing and money's flowing, there's much more that spills out, and it spills out to sort of tears down, and keeps everybody busy.
Well, I think also there is more, when times are good, there is just more kind of like willingness from companies to spend. I think obviously if you're going to do one large shoot in bad times, well, in good times you'd do the large shoot and you'd really go for it, and then that you'd also back that up and support it with smaller shoot here, top it up here, get some fresh assets there. And it just doesn't feel now like the smaller shoots like that or those satellite shoots, if you will, tend to be kind of happening as much as they were doing.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Yeah, and I think you can sort of expand that out everywhere. And I think the other thing, we've seen, we're in, it's quite a funny downturn because it's been quite long. I actually think it's been since Brexit. I'm pretty sure things have been a little bit different for everybody since that point. Whereas the previous downturns that we've had, I think I joined the industry in a downturn. I think there was obviously a massive one in 2008, which was sort of crushing. But then the bounce back from that came quite a bit quicker. So this one's tricky because it's sort of hard to pinpoint to any one thing, and it seems to be really dragging. And I think what's happening is it's sort of woven in with these other massive anxieties about what it is to be a photographer. We're talking about photography. I mean, I've got friends who are writers, friends in music. These anxieties are pretty desperate in a lot of industries. So this isn't just photography. But I think it just adds a huge amount of anxiety to the other things that are kind of in the wings, with people worrying about whether this is a career, long term. But yeah.
It is interesting you say that it's felt like a long one. So I was chatting to someone yesterday. We went out for a drink, and it's about a year since I've seen him, and we were basically having not far off the same conversations. And he said, "Oh, do you think when will it kind of get back?" And I was like, I don't think it's going to get back. I think everyone's talking about it kind of having a bit of a reset or kind of settling, and I'm like, but what if, right? What if this is the new normal? What if for the next few years, we are in fact just going to have a bit of chaos, and that might actually be the status quo for a bit, and you just go, oh, cool. Yeah, no, I hadn't actually thought that this could be it. Because obviously I've now been having these chats, like you say, since Brexit, but especially the past 18 months feels like it's been a lot of the same conversations with a lot of the same people who aren't, they've been waiting for it to just calm down, but I just don't feel like it's going to. I feel almost like it's going to get worse over the next kind of 18 months.
So this is just an opinion now. I'm no political expert, and I'm not an economist, but I know there's sort of the budget with the national insurance changes, that those sorts of things. I'm not arguing against any decisions that have been made, or I don't have political allegiances that don't align with who's in power. But it's just, I think it's specific. It's some quite specific things going on at the moment that are really keeping things down. And what we've seen over the years is, Tom, I'm not saying you're wrong. No one's got a crystal ball.
Oh God, please do. If you think I'm wrong, I want to hear it.
But I think there's two things. I think it's that you could be right. I think you've got to just carry on. You can't carry on thinking we're going to turn a corner, everything's going to be fine. You can't run your business like that. You've got to run your business how things are today, because otherwise you're going to find yourself in trouble. But I do think things are very suppressed at the moment because businesses don't have the money. They're just simply, that advertising is something that people can rein back in. So if they've suddenly got to find a ton more money for their staffing costs, they'll be looking down the things at what they can afford to cut. And I'm afraid, finding cheaper ways to advertise is probably one of them. So that does hurt us.
Well, let's talk about that then, because I think that actually leads us really nicely onto quite a big elephant in the room. So we want to talk about cutting costs, and obviously AI seemingly now is just it's not even being talked about. It is everywhere, right? I haven't had a single deck come in the past year that isn't almost exclusively AI mock-ups and stuff like that. I'm sure you guys are the same. So it would be great to kind of hear your thoughts on how it's going to go, because obviously it's a really interesting thing from an ad agency kind of model. Clients are obviously pressuring them to cut costs, and at the same time the agencies still need to make money to survive, and they're kind of going, well, if it saves you the time, well, we're not going to pay you for your time. So how are they then going to kind of justify their costs, and then what then does that mean to people like you and us guys?
Sure. So I mean, AI is here. It's as you say, it's on every deck that comes in. So storyboards, everything like that. I mean, just actually thinking about that, those are people whose skills have already been replaced. So it's no joke. I do have writer friends whose sub editors have lost their jobs because AI can do the job. It's very real. So I think we're kind of professionally, we're probably glass half full people. And we'll sort of end up, I'm sure, through a lot of this chat, we'll talk about positives. But, for someone who's lost their job, there's nothing positive. So,
No.
that needs to be said. But the thing about AI and photography is we've always had CGI. So we've always had retouching. We've had CG for some time. I mean, we've been doing this for long enough that we've seen sort of digital photography come in, saw CG come in, and that had a huge impact. I would say CG probably, I mean, I don't know how this is going to pan out, but I think CG potentially would have had as much, if not a bigger impact when it came in, because for still life photographers who were shooting products, phones, things like that, which were coming out constantly, or cars, people who were car photographers shooting not just the car in the amazing kind of scene, but also had built their studios and careers around shooting, 15 versions of the same car with different lights, different this, different that. That changed, not overnight, but really quite fast. And actually, funny enough, a lot of that was happening at the same time as an economic downturn. So there were quite a lot of people at the time talking about the death of photography and things like that, because things were changing so fast. The other thing that happened around about then was lots of ad agencies sort of, they got their own in-house studios. So you'd have an in-house teams. It used to be you'd have photographers in studios just shooting anything that needed to be shot to be press quality. And that changed too. So in photography, we've had these huge waves of change already. And actually we've had the ability to fake things and to make pretty much everything fake, apart from people, for a long, long time. And what we saw in the years after CG came in is we would be called into agencies for meetings, and we'd be talking about creative scamps that they'd drawn up, where it was obviously something quite fantastical happening. It was obvious we were going to be using CG because that's just the only way to do it. But what they were doing was begging that it didn't feel like CG. So they're just saying, this cannot feel like CGI. And for me, AI just feels like an extension of that. I think it's not something you can kind of brush off as irrelevant, because it is going to change people's lives. I'm sure it's going to change all of our lives, and that there's going to be good things and bad things. And no one knows how far that's going to go. But in terms of this very kind of narrow thing we're talking about, of the work of professional photographers and directors in relation to advertising, and the layering in of AI onto that, I feel like AI is just an extension of CG, which we've had for a long time. So, my friends who work in music and composition for commercial use, and friends who are writers, they've not had these challenges before. And this is a massive moment for them in a way, actually, that perhaps it isn't so much for us as photographer directors. So that's sort of, I hold on to that a little bit. And the other thing I hold on to is how it hopefully puts the value into the right areas for how people see photographers and directors, really, and what they can bring. Because you're not just there to to deliver kind of commercial quality output. You're not just there. Obviously you have all those skills, the lighting and technical skills, invaluable. But you're not just there for that. You're there to bring a point of view, to bring personality, and to bring some humanity and intelligence to what they want to create.
Intelligence, I'm out.
Well, okay, wit. But yeah, it is. It's a point of view. It's a point of view. So, okay, maybe not intelligence, but a distinctive individual intellect. Like, it's not like it's not your IQ. It's actually that there is a living, thinking person who has made this and connected with it. And I think people feel that when they see it. And I think advertising's always given value to that. And that's why it's always wanted to work with, I guess it's artists, isn't it? It wants to work with artists who work with lens-based media. So whether it's directors, photographers, CG artists, it's people who bring something. So
I do wonder with AI, I mean, obviously one big difference from CGI is that AI is so much more accessible to people. It's not, it's not something that is a real kind of skill set like CGI is, in the sense that anybody can start to write prompts quite quickly. So it does make it a lot more democratic in terms of people having involvement in that. And the second point would be that, the difficulty with talking about AI is we're talking about AI now, but like where AI now is so different to where it was a year ago. And they're talking now that AGI could be with us as soon as next year. And obviously, when you get AI to the point where it becomes learning and developing, those things which currently are holding it back will not necessarily be there. But I think that is a wider societal kind of problem, rather than, we're worrying about how it's going to affect our industry. But the reality is that's kind of like stacking deck chairs on a sinking ship, because everything else might be going to crap anyway, and will be so drastically changing. What's interesting, I guess, is you were talking about how where this came from, and I do think it was kind of Brexit was the start of it, I think, for us in the UK at least. But what it's led to is then COVID. It's led to this kind of increase in populism in politics, which has then led to other things, and rise of conflict, tariff, trade wars. All of this kind of stuff has come from those early days. And the danger is what AI will look like 2 years from now in the hands of the people that are currently in power, without making it too political. So I think, like for photography, it's definitely going to have an effect, but it's also going to have such an effect elsewhere that everything's going to be shaken up. And I think, it's almost it's impossible to predict where it's going to go. But I do think that human element that you're talking about, and we've discussed this on the show before, of how clients will want still to have that connection to something to make it feel tangible, but also the process will become part of the reason that they book somebody, because actually they want to be part of a team. They want that collaboration. They want to have a day out of the office on a shoot. If the money's there, that will become as big a draw as the actual finished work.
I think that's a valuable part of it, and I think that's true. But I don't think it's. I think that's a secondary benefit that people will enjoy, and will be a reason that there's.
When I say a big draw, I think a big draw for the client booking, perhaps.
I understand.
Not for the end client who doesn't get to enjoy any of that.
I understand.
Consumer.
But no, I actually think. I think that you're right. It's going to get better and better. You're not going to be able to discern the difference between polished advertising and AI polished advertising. So I think what we could be seeing is, and what I'm saying about why it might be quite positive for creativity and positive for creatives. So for real kind of for people who come with a point of view, with something to say, be that politically, socially, something to say with their art, which is photographic or in film. So for these people who, I guess, they're not going to stop being artists just because it's possible to make their art another way. They're going to want to carry on doing it because that's what they do. And maybe incorporating AI or whatever, it's kind of irrelevant, how these people make their work. But the point is, for 25 years now, I've seen with our company really top agencies and ad agencies and clients wanting to draw on that to make really excellent work that stands out. So you're right, maybe a greater percentage of the sort of flood of work that's out there will be made in this kind of way. You won't be able to tell the difference, but it's still going to look pretty average, I'd say. And it will make the work that gets made by real people just that much more special. I mean, I was chatting we do a lot with students, as I mentioned. So we were chatting with the documentary MA students at Westminster. I think that course is now called Expanded Photography, because I think even the world of documentary photography has been changing so much. It's like, is that actually, the right title for the course anymore? And the students and the lecturer was sort of talking about, well, as long as people are taking photos, there's going to be a call for communication to incorporate work that looks like that as well. And the very best way of doing that surely is to have a person doing it. And not just that you can feel it in the work, but I think, as you say, who you are, who you are as a person, photographer, your story, your identity, the things that interest you all become kind of relevant. I mean, we're quoting on a job at the moment, which is I can't say a lot about it, but I can definitely say it's super important who the photographers are, where they come from, what they care about, their stories. It's a massive part of it. Um, I don't know that that's necessarily an indicator that there's going to be lots more of that to come. But I think in a world where work that's not AI is going to still be made, there's probably going to be layers of that where they're going to want to show that it wasn't AI and almost show the people who were making it as well. So it just all becomes quite important. So, I think that's good news for photographers, because I guess I'm imagining all photographers got into it because they love making work, and they want to make work a particular way because that's where their heart is. And it's just that I suppose we're saying the commercial world for a long time now, the best of it, which we try and go for, it does care what you care about. And I think this kind of flood of generic work that it's possible to make now is only going to make that even more specialized. So and valued,
Yeah, no, I agree. I also think that we're at a really interesting point with AI. Obviously, GPT-5 is going to be released, I think, later this year. I'm sure the internet will have a complete meltdown and go completely ballistic over it. At the same time, there was kind of reports, or kind of there was somebody very well known in that world who don't really want to bring up, but they were saying in January or February of this year that AI had basically exhausted all available human data to it. And you kind of go, well, for it to improve and fine tune and do these big leaps that I think people are expecting, it needs more. It needs people to create. And so obviously we're now at this bizarre juncture where if you want those big leaps, you have to then also have people creating, but then it's also stopping people from creating. And so it's going to be really interesting to see whether it continues to improve at the rate it has been, or if it slows down, it's honestly, it's such a, and I'm going back to what you were saying earlier, that nobody has a concrete path in front of them. Nobody has a clue what on earth this is all going to lead to and how it's going to be. So the idea that we can plan is pretty much out of the window. But yeah,
that's interesting, isn't it, about AI and what it draws from? But how can you ask it to create what hasn't been created? Because that's really the most amazing stuff, isn't it? And the most interesting commissions we've ever had are from agencies that are brave enough to commission people who are really good at one thing to do something they've absolutely never done before, but just bring a completely different twist to it, and it sends them off in another direction. And I think that's sort of it's kind of a little bit beyond AI's capability. It's an amazing tool, and I'm not diminishing how incredible it's going to be. And at the moment, you're sort of in a place where people see AI coming on TV. You'll be watching something with friends, and they'd just be, "Oh, it's AI," and people feel a bit let down by it, or a bit like, there's that moment of, "Is it AI?" And not because you're watching it with people who necessarily feel threatened by it or it annoys them that it exists. It's just simply. You feel a little bit cheated. It's not building trust. I would have thought that's what making good communication is about. It's about building trust and connection. Those things. So yeah.
Well, and also being very careful to not damage your brand's legacy. For example, I'm sure we all saw last Christmas, there was a drinks company who released an advert that was completely AI, and the internet tore it apart. And I feel that undid a lot of what they'd built for the past 30 years or however long it was. And I think brands have now got to be very, very, very careful about how they do it. And, Vogue, for example, has had this huge backlash for using AI generated models. And, it's such a tightrope for people to walk. And I just feel that when you are hiring photographers and hiring models and hiring makeup artists and things like that, you don't have to walk such a tightrope. You don't have to suddenly, if you kind of go, okay, well, we would like real representation across this campaign. And you go, okay, great. Well, you tell us the types of people you're after. We will cast, and you can choose from thousands of them, as opposed to, AI going insert generic person here, it just doesn't. It feels like it just would be safer in general just to hire people.
And just in terms of what's happening now, and for your listeners, just maybe hearing, for us, it's part of our day to day, so we can kind of see what's happening. But we're seeing AI used as elements. So it's quite useful. Obviously, it's very useful for writing. It's very useful for photography. It's as part of the retouch process. It can be if you're sort of struggling to find elements or extensions or things like that. So it's possibly freed things up a little bit. So what might have been previously a super expensive retouching job, there's been areas where you can draw on what's possible and things become a little simpler. We're seeing photographers using it as a sketchbook. I mean, we mentioned all of the layouts that come through from agencies and mid-journey renders, but also photographers are sketching out ideas and working with it. Perhaps images in their entirety, but also backgrounds or concepts, and then shooting the human elements to work into the overall. So, I mean, it's an amazing creative tool like that. And then, on jobs, there are jobs that we're losing to AI. You can't you can't dress that up. We've had one just 2 weeks ago. So, a power company, and it involved a sort of overhead shot of a house. And we would have been doing that shoot, but it was too easy to sort that out of the way. So that's kind of gone away. So you can't pretend that that things are changing a little bit. But dwelling on some of these sort of I was thinking about some of these themes before we were chatting today, because I knew they're probably going to come up. But this thing about the thing is about the future is you can sort of see what's being taken away almost in slow motion, and you could panic about that. But what you can't see is the avenues that open up as well. I mean, we've talked about CGI coming in. I mean, that was a point when pretty much 99% of our work was still photography. It was, we weren't doing any motion. And now I'd say, it's almost 25% of what we do is motion work, perhaps. Possibly more. We've never actually sat down to really work out what it is. But it takes a huge amount of time, and that's all billable time. They're quite involved jobs. There's a lot of pre-production involved, a lot of post-production. It's also creatively really interesting. It's taken photographers into another dimension, really, with what's possible with their work, be that in kind of storytelling or artistically. So, that's one avenue that completely opened up and is potentially continuing to open up, because there's other changes in the industry at the moment, with ad agencies maybe taking a bit more production in-house, which sort of changes things for that traditional model of production companies repping directors. So I'm sure that will continue, but it's just everything's constantly changing. So for every revenue stream that you've had previously that you might feel you completely depended on, there's other possibilities opening up all the time, which we kind of don't know about until we're in them. So it's just to keep in mind, really, that the world's never stood still, and certainly in the history of what we've been doing, it's never ever stood still. But there's certain constants that have always been valued, and we sort of really hold on to those.
I find, actually, for example, can we use you guys as a business as an example of this? I find you guys fascinating because you have this wonderful advantage over individual photographers who aren't repped, because you guys are almost like a double-ended, you're almost like an egg timer, but with the ends cut off, right? So loads of agencies will bring different jobs. Right, okay, just hold on, bear with me. I know where I'm going with this. Imagine two funnels glued together, thin bit to thin bit, right? So loads of agencies will bring stuff to you. So you get to see the whole breadth of pitches, I'm sure, come through the agency. And then you also get to spread out to a load of different photographers, but then you're also hearing from all these different voices. And I assume on very candid terms with the photographers, because obviously by the sounds of it, you've repped some of them for a very long time. Whereas obviously solo photographers, we don't have the same amount of breadth coming in as from agencies. And we also don't have the volume of voices, I think, from the other things. So it positions you guys in this fantastic sweet spot in a way to be able to position yourselves and see those revenue streams maybe opening up. Does that make sense?
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, we're certainly broader than an individual photographer business, but then on a spectrum of vantage points, and we're still a tiny little slither of the pie of the world of photography or the world of advertising. So, but it's true, yeah. Perhaps even though we're a small company, 4 of us full time, maybe we do kind of sit in quite a vantage point for seeing different sort of fashions or different streams of work, growing and diminishing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
But we still don't have a crystal ball, so we can tell you what's happening when it's happening or after it's happened. But yeah.
Well, if you can tell me as it's happening, I'd really appreciate that.
Okay, try and do that.
I think one question would be interesting to kind of ask from our listeners' point of view is, as an agent, what is it, having said all of you said about kind of having a voice and having an opinion and a point of view, what attributes is it that you look for in photographers that you want to rep and work with? What things stand out to you? What's important, and how important is a personality versus the work?
Definitely. I mean, that's something we get asked a lot as well. I mean, for us, we're always looking for, there's no right or wrong type of personality. So I think people don't need to. I think there's kind of a thing of like, you have to be. I mean, we were chatting to the most incredible photographer yesterday. So somebody whose work we've known for a little while. We put them forward to be part of BBH's Unsigned, and BBH snapped them up, and they were part of that. They're sort of a little bit left of field, and actually chatting to them very recently, yesterday, it really felt like their perception of what was needed, it was as if it didn't sort of align, that they weren't sure they were the right sort of person for it. And I would be really keen to dispel that for anyone listening to this who thinks you need to be a certain type of personality to make it work in this world, because it is far more about the work you make and where that comes from. And a team can be built around to, I guess, cover the things that don't necessarily come naturally to you. So if there was anyone watching this who wasn't a kind of natural sort of like show person or like a PR person or just super confident, you don't need you don't necessarily need that. I mean, a lot of those things can really help. If you're naturally like a social butterfly and really comfortable at industry parties and all those sorts of things, it all helps, but it's not the be all and end all. But going back to your question, so I just wanted to say first that there's no kind of wrong personality. The next thing is, I think it's become incredibly, for us, it's always been a thing. It's like people are like their work, and people's work is them. People and their work are one and the same. So, I think attitude is a really important thing. So I think it's people's work and their personalities. We want the most unique work and personality possible. So we love people who can't help but make the work that they make. So Louise Hagger's a good example. She's an incredible food photographer. She's a brilliant, just a brilliant creative, really. And I think Louise, I don't know, I think she sees herself as a photographer, businesswoman, and food photographer. We see her as an artist, really. And I think that's how we've always seen her. I think she came in with her work and it sort of just blew us away. And we, as I say, we've never been an agency that needed a person to tick the food box on our site. We just want to rep spectacular photographers who people get excited about their work. And for us, Louise really just ticked that box massively straight away. And she's amazing, and her work's amazing. And she is a very busy commercial food photographer as well, but that almost sort of comes next. So those are the people we're looking for, the people who don't look to us to advise them on what to shoot. we've never been that agent either. I think we want people who really know what they're doing. They can have moments where they're off down a dead end, or they're maybe unsure of what they're doing. That's all important and part of the picture as well. You don't have to always be on course. But I think just being connected to the work they make and being on a journey, and making work that you can't help but recognize as theirs in a really unself-conscious way, that's probably what we're looking for. Yeah.
See, I find that really interesting because you guys are trying to find, it's a very rare type of person, isn't it? Because you've said earlier that you are trying to find people who aren't already making the dollar. And so if you're already making the dollar, chances are you know what you're shooting already.
Well, you
right?
say that. I mean, it certainly doesn't discount people that they're already busy. But I think if that's the secondary thing. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
To find those diamonds in the rough who kind of have the voice, have the idea of where they want to go, but haven't yet broken through, that's probably quite rare, because I assume the majority of people who haven't yet broken through are sort of in that stage in their career where they're almost like at the scattergun, and they're like, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, I'm trying to figure out what it is they're after. So to find that person that you're trying to find is probably quite hard.
Yeah, and there's no single way in which it happens either. So Louise, we can't take the credit for kind of finding Louise as a diamond in the rough. Louise was already a busy photographer, and she was at a point in her career where she was changing agents. So that was the point we met Louise. I do think we were lucky to be part of her emerging as perhaps a little bit more of a busy mainstream photographer, but bringing with her all the best qualities that she had as someone who was a bit on the periphery. But we can't sort of claim to have discovered Louise. But there certainly are photographers who we've worked with from the very start. I mean, we've known Laura Panak since she was a student. Kian Obersmith, we met Kian at the Magnum Print Room when he'd won a competition, and we've known him since he was a student. But there's other photographers we represent who were sort of known names in other worlds, and we'd look at them and think, well, why on earth are you not shooting in our world? Because your work's amazing. And I think accidentally we've ended up being quite an inclusive agency for that reason as well, and that's something we're quite proud of. So I think we haven't sort of set out to particularly gender equality, we haven't sort of set out to represent female photographers, but I think with the approach we've had to who we look for and what we value, I think we've ended up just simply representing who we feel are just the best photographers. And it just so happens that, it's not the case that most of them are men, which has been historically perhaps. So that's been a big change too. Yeah,
that actually was one of our nice comments in the members group. Is that some of the feedback was that actually, what a wonderful roster, and look at the diversity across it. It's a brilliant roster. And as far as obviously the quality of the artists go, but obviously the diversity as well. So, and I know you didn't set out that way. It's doesn't go unnoticed.
We're really delighted by that happy accident. No, definitely. And we're just it's exciting. It's exciting working with diverse voices, and I think that's what the other thing you're sort of looking for is. You obviously don't want to duplicate. We're quite sensitive with that too. So So hopefully that diversity just happens a little bit naturally as well. Yeah.
Right. Can I ask? Obviously, artists come and go. Now, obviously, I understand at your agency there's probably less of a turnover compared to many agents. Obviously, you guys have repped some people for years since student times and things like that. Of the people that have come and gone, and actually, let's just branch it out from your agency as well. Across the world of photography, we talked about personality types. Are there any kind of attributes that you can see in the really successful people? Are there any kind of things, we've talked about, that person might not be right for that job, or that might not be right, but are there any kind of attributes that all of the top people tend to have?
It's funny you should ask, because we were invited to talk for another organisation, and that was actually the theme of the talk. So
Oh, there we go.
it was about maintaining a long career, and I think it had us dwelling on, I think, the attributes of the photographers who'd had these incredible long careers, and what it was about them, and what we could learn from that. So yes, I'm well armed for that question, but I bet you probably don't have another 45 minutes to talk about it. But just in quick,
I've got the time.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I think the quick version would just be, it is a very, very competitive business, isn't it? It's really hard to get into. It takes a hell of a lot of passion and talent, tenacity, endless optimism, positivity, humility, all of those things. That's how you get in. And I think talking to yourselves and other established photographers, you'll know that journey that you went on to get it going. In a nutshell, you just have to keep doing that. And actually, that is the thing that we've seen, is that never really losing that thing of, if somebody calls up with a job and it's a favoury type thing and it's a pain, it's just, oh, what is in this for me? I've got bills to pay. I've got a mortgage now. I've got 3 kids, for God's sake. Like, I need work. You didn't have that when you started. I think you've just got to somehow channel that passion that you had when you were first doing it, and not kind of pick up any of the things that can present as something that could be a little bit negative. I guess it's like a sense of sort of entitlement, or ego. So yeah.
Could we? So I think maybe resilience would be kind of a universal trait. Can we talk about resilience though? Because, and this will bring me on to a question we've had in the group. It is very hard as a photographer. It was always a hard career. Since COVID and going to kind of remote working for a lot of people and only in the office a couple of days a week, it's harder and harder and harder to get FaceTime with people at agencies, to go and show your book, to go in and do the meetings. And when you do physical mailers, I sent out a really large mailer a couple of weeks ago, and I had a fine response. I was kind of hoping for a bit more, but then when I spoke to people at various meetings, they hadn't got anything from the post room. And it feels like we're kind of, even though if you're trying to make all the right moves, it almost feels like you're pushing against a tractor that's driving the other direction. So I don't know, are you guys still okay with FaceTime? Not FaceTime as in the app. But.
We definitely are. And it is, I'm at home today because we were recording this, and it's great to be able to incorporate a little bit of that. But really, we're in the office, and we enjoy going in, and we enjoy the hub of people coming and going. And we get out, so I'm here today, but Emma was out at a design agency this morning. Francis was out somewhere else yesterday. We're constantly all out seeing people, and we do find that makes things happen. So trying to make that happen. But I mean, what I would say is that I say what you describe is some doors closing in terms of the percentage of time people are at agencies or even have desks to pin up postcards and things like that. But look at us doing this, for instance. I mean, obviously this is a recorded thing, but having this video call and chatting with one another and having a really valuable experience and sharing ideas and connecting. And this exists. It didn't before. So I think you could look at what's taken away, or you could look at what we've got, or you sort of combine the two and just think, well, there's no point dwelling on what you can't change. I think you've just got to simply plow on in every way possible. And for everything that gets taken away, there is in all likelihood something that's going to spring up as an opportunity that could be spun into a positive. So, I mean, it's not just to diminish how hard it is. I think what you're describing is very real, because I think it's as a photographer working solo, you really rely on hearing what people think about your work. So our photographers, for instance, have that really nice thing of, they will hear from all of us that have been out with their books, and they'll hear opportunities that were turned up, or people that connected with the work, or so we're doing that for them, and it's kind of amplifying what they do, and it gives a bit of that feedback, which is so important, and it's so nourishing seeing people in real life. I think in a way, chats like this are really great and they're nourishing, but it's not quite the same. as meeting
I
someone.
think that's where a lot of photographers really struggle, because so many photographers work from home or work solitary, and the chances of them, compared to 20 years ago when you go to the lab to pick up the work and you'd be having those conversations with other photographers, are few and far between. So to actually get critical response to your work and to get honest feedback, not just somebody being like, oh yeah, no, it's great. It's like, that's not that helpful. You want to know where it's falling down, where it's not up to scratch, what could be better. And I think nowadays, that's not just going to be delivered to you happenstance by the fact that you're going to a lab. You've got to sort those, find those places and have those conversations and make them happen yourself. So I'm lucky in that I share a studio with 5 photographers, but we go to Arles each year, and part of the reason we do that is almost just to have those conversations, to force ourselves to have the space of a week to be able to indulge in having those debates and to discuss work. But I think for a lot of people, a lot of photographers, that's really hard to find. Social media just doesn't cut it for that, does it?
Not quite. I think it's not to be ignored, and it has a massive value. And it, social media is wonderful, but it's in addition to seeing people for real. And I think that seeing people for real, not only is it good for you as a person, it's very good for getting work. So we just see it happen. It's like a kind of Mexican wave that follows us wherever we go. The stuff comes in, and you can't ignore that. It's very tangible. Yeah.
So I mean, if you were, advice for young photographers, I mean, it's one thing obviously we get asked about a lot when we say that we're going to have a photographer's agent come along, is one of the top questions is always, well, what tips would you give photographers who are looking to be repped? What aspect skills should you be looking for in their agent is another one, because I think a lot of photographers, when they're starting out, they have this idea of, oh, I'll get repped, and then it's kind of like everything will be fine, dandy and sorted. And of course, it's not that easy, and there are good agents and less good agents, and there are, in the same way, there are good photographers and less good photographers. So it goes both ways. What would you say as an agent is an important skill that you bring to your photographers?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we just see how our passion for the photographer's work translates into jobs for them. So the fact that we don't find it hard to take out one of our photographer's books and really get genuinely quite excited about it and be able to tell people why they should be working with them, because we believe that. And I think it's our belief in their work that is what matters. So I think if you meet someone who you sense has got a real sense of belief in what you do,
that's a good start.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good start. Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of really good agents out there, and I think you're right to point out that it's not a sort of magic bullet, because I think we can see sometimes that you might think, if I had an agent, I'd have access to all of this stuff that I don't, and that's really not the case. I think you can do an awful lot. In fact, you could do a phenomenal amount. We work with photographers off roster as well, and that's something we've always done. But I think perhaps that's something that's opening up a little bit more in this world of representing like exceptional talent. And the lid's blown off really where you come from, what you're working on. People can reach out to people from anywhere and work with them. So yeah, just I mentioned off roster because there's someone we work with off roster who's as busy as any of our photographers, and we're not sort of promoting them on our site. We're not. They're in the circle, but they do that themselves. And how have they done that? It's simply the quality of their work, their the force of their kind of personal PR machine. But really, it's about their work. The fact that they're demonstrating that they're working on commission regularly, and those commissions are great, and that they feel as exciting as their personal work, but at their best. It's all of those things. So getting yourself about with your own work, you can do a lot of that, and there's no limit to how far you can take that. And a good agent will amplify it for you and support you, because the one thing you can't do as someone on your own is be at that shoot and simultaneously quoting the next job and managing your diary. And all of that. So at that point, you need help. But then, there's a lot of good agents that can help you with that. So yeah, I wouldn't have anyone listening to this think if only I had an agent, it might help me level up, because there's essentially there's nothing you can't do by yourself other than that kind of multitasking and super amplifying it to whatever their list is of people they know.
I would love to ask you, I've got a couple of questions, but we'll kind of wrap up. You obviously see a lot of people come to you and say, I'd love to be rep by you. Here's my portfolio. What do you think? Again, we're talking kind of like really kind of high level terms here. When you see a portfolio that really sings and that you just go, oh, wow, what, because I'm not talking about the work in general or things like that, because I'm sure you'll be wowed by, great work that you want to represent, that you can get behind. But when people bring in a portfolio and you go, that's really beautifully presented, or that was a lovely touch that they did there. Are there things that you kind of, or on the flip side, oh God, I'd never put that in a portfolio, or that layout's awful. Are there any kind of like, great things, terrible things?
Yeah, I think the only things that there's only the only kind of standouts on that question, because I can actually think of, it's funny, when you were just mentioning that, I was thinking of some really nice books we've seen. But ultimately, you can see someone who's thought very carefully about the pairings of images. It's a beautiful presentation. But then further to that, once you're inside, everything's kind of immaculate and it's presented beautifully and thoughtfully. The pairings, the sequencing, the length of the book, and everything else. And you can really enjoy it at that level. But if the work's not extraordinary, it's still not going to be extraordinary work. And whilst we can kind of moan about someone coming in with, I don't know, a laptop that's, hanging off its hinges with like loads of different windows of different projects, and they're pulling out like zines and books and like different things, and it's just a massive muddle. If the work is super exciting, we can just think, we can sort this out. That's almost a gift for us. It's like, well, we can help you make a book. We can help you sort this out. But what you've got is gold. So there are rights and wrongs with books, but I think I wouldn't dwell too much on the presentation of the work that you've already done, in minutiae, and really kind of worrying about it, because what we care much more about, and the question we really ask people who've come in, is what are you working on at the moment? What are you working on next? And how quickly do they turn those things around? Some people make an amazing project and then it's just kind of sat, it kind of paralyzes them. And, we need people who are on the move and have that energy. And sometimes that doesn't tie in neatly with a great, neat presentation that is beautiful. Sometimes it's messy. Yeah, so it's, the other wrongs are just, I don't know, coming in with an enormous box with white gloves and expecting people to, it's just, I think you just got to, a lot of meetings are happening in cafes now. You just need to be a little bit aware that a humongous book, although we do have huge books and they are wonderful, but
they're just not quite the right
it's
thing
a tiny
for a
bit
small.
impractical. Yeah, it's a tiny bit impractical, and so it's just a thought, but yeah.
Good to know. I'm in the process of trying to redo a portfolio, so I'm especially taking notes.
Yeah.
So,
but just don't, because I can think. So Catherine Hyland, who we represent, her book is enormous and it's stunning. And when we do go in and do folio shows regularly, people really enjoy seeing a book like that. I think it's just that there's a lot of meetings now that do happen out of agencies, and you don't have the benefit of an enormous desk specifically for that book. And yeah.
Do you have a preference for books versus print boxes out of interest?
No, not really. I think, just
again, it comes down to the work being spectacular, does
it? That's the thing. And it sounds really stupid, doesn't it? Just have spectacular work. But like, I think that,
no, it's the thing that everyone skirts around. That's the thing is that's the hardest part. The easy part is making something look good and presenting it well. That's not difficult. Anyone can kind of do that to some degree, but it's the talent really is in getting the good work in the first place.
this is the point. And there's a way that people got to the work, and that's just by always worrying about what comes next. I feel like some of our best photographers, it's like they're being chased by something. They never lose that. Like, even the ones who've had a career where they've done so much already, they've just constantly got this thing on their back. They're like, oh God, I've got this thing coming. Just drive, and I think, you could spend too much time tinkering with the limited amount of things that you've done already, and not worrying enough about what's coming next and what you're on, and keeping it going. And that's how the exciting work emerges. And, and the new work that's exciting, that will get you noticed by agents and get you noticed by commissioners.
One last question that we have that's come in is to do with licensing work in libraries versus kind of commissioning new work. Have you seen much change in that over the last 15 years, say? Because libraries have changed a lot. There's a lot more of them now, and the type of work that they're offering is maybe a bit more contemporary than previously held in libraries, although maybe that's just a trend thing. Have you seen any kind of evidence that that's a growing side of how clients now will take on work, or is it just a response to the fact that there is more projects out there that need quick turnarounds, and it's easier to buy in a picture than it is to commission a fresh one?
There's a lot of agencies and photographers. There's a lot of leaning into what's out there, not necessarily just in libraries, but on photographers' sites as well. I feel in that picture search world, people don't want things to look like stock. So you're dipping into photographers' archives as well as going through official libraries. I think, although I worked in a library a long, long time ago, and as part of my wife's many revenue streams, picture research is part of it for newspapers and also for advertising. So, I know kind of a little bit about what's going on, but in terms of how that's changed over the last 15 years, I wouldn't be the person to be able to give you accurate information on that, I don't think. But it's always been part of the picture. I mean, what we're seeing now, though, is you've got this added thing of you can generate a stock shot. So it's kind of, if you can't find it and license it, you can also conjure it.
Yes.
But stock, just like CG, stock's always been there. So it's a little like AI, isn't it? In that we've always been in competition with stock, CG. So it's just evolved a little. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, as technology gets better and it's easier to search in more defined ways and have large archives personally for people online, whether or not that will, change, and I'm sure it will. Okie dokie. Well, before we go, we always have two final questions, which are your Desert Island camera and your Desert Island photo book. So,
oh wow,
do you have a Desert Island? Let's start with the camera, because that's normally quite easy, because it's not doesn't take too much thought. But what if you were on a desert?
Loved it. Like, I think my first camera, I think I borrowed an Olympus. I'm really not techie, but it was like an Olympus 35mm camera with like a fixed lens, like a 50mm lens. I just love those cameras. Like, so something like that. I like sort of looking through and looking through a lens. So through a mirror. So yeah.
We'll give you an OM1 then. That's
nothing fancy.
Classic Olympus.
Yeah, exactly. Small, can go everywhere. Yeah.
OM1 it is.
And what photo book would you say has had the most impact on you, perhaps? And you can either answer us as something that's you've seen recently that's really kind of moved you, or maybe something that really impacted you earlier on in your journey.
So, I mean, I could pull a name, but I don't think it would be the truthful answer, because I have the same thing with music, and it was the same thing that led me into my job. Is I don't sort of tend to lock on. I'm sort of quite broad in my interest, and it just there's so many. I could list you 10 names, and even they wouldn't be representative, because really it's 20, 30. That I've just got a passion for so many different streams within photography, so there wouldn't really be. I think I'd probably need an iPad.
I'm not sure we can let you get away with that. We've never had anyone who's kind of not been able to, like, okay, so out of your 10 names, give us 10 names.
Give us 10 books.
Yeah. Cruel. That's cruel.
You said 10, so I know you said then 30, but let's. Let's
Well,
get some
okay, Richard. Okay,
influences, early
so
influences.
so early influence that Richard Mizrash. So
Okay.
he's a landscape photographer, American photographer, and he made a book called the Star Book, and he was sort of interested in landscape and particularly like historic battle sites and things like that. But instead of shooting the site, he would just tip the camera up at the sky. And he made this book called the Sky Book, which I don't know if I would love it now, but I remember I really loved it at one point. And that probably would have been a point at which I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, so that could be my book.
Would that be a case of loving the concept more than the images, or was it a bit of both?
I think I loved how expansive it was. I think you know, it's just so fascinating what's up there as well, and it was quite an interesting idea for a book. I mean, every plate was another night sky, long exposure, large format, and he just did it so well. He did that book on Golden Gate Bridge as well, which was just a whole book of shot of Golden Gate Bridge from the same spot. Something kind of interesting about that. I don't know. It just kind of struck a chord.
Yeah,
But that's not to say, I think pinning my passion for photography on this one person seems not representative. But, yeah.
I saw a project recently of somebody who'd shot the same street corner in New York for like a decade or so.
Yeah.
And you saw the same characters because he'd be there at the same time every day. And it got used, the same concept was in a film. I can't remember what the film was now, with Harvey Keitel playing the photographer who used to photograph the same corner in Brooklyn every day. But I think that kind of thing of using photography in a more conceptual way is always fascinating, because so much of our work in the commercial world, you can start to lose sight of that, because we're producing images that have to read straight away, whereas something like a personal project that has more of a concept behind it can seem, unsellable in a way. So it's nice to see that from time to time.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think if those concepts can hook people who are passionate, because all the commissioners are passionate about photography. If there's any concept that you've shot that can hook people and reach them, then that it instantly becomes commercially viable because it's connected them to you. And then
that's true. Okay, well that's a good point to end it on, and I appreciate your candid responses to those questions. Okay, so James, if people want to find out more, where can they find? I presume Wyatt Clarke Jones, I know that you guys are on Instagram. You obviously have a website.
Yeah, website, social, absolutely. And we do portfolio reviews. So we can't see everybody that sends work in, but whoever sends work into us, we will look at everything. We're genuinely we're interested to see what people are working on. Add us to your newsletter, share your work, and you can always submit to try and have we'll try and fix time to have a portfolio review with us, which is potentially something that could happen. So we always make time to do that, but we can't obviously make time to see everybody. But yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's very generous of you.
Yeah.
No problem. We love it. It's the best part of the job. Yeah.
Well, we would probably agree in some part. I remember I went in and did a portfolio review, and as I walked in, this is not with you guys, I will say, quickly preface it, but as I went into this agency, the art buyer was quite well known for letting their feelings known on the work, and a photographer walked past me in tears on the way out.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh my God, here we go.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, we have a fair bit of experience of that. And funnily enough, some of those people that can be quite, you might come away feeling like, God, did they like that? They would actually pick up the phone and be calling for that photographer that they were disparaging about in a couple of days' time. So sometimes, it's not always how you think. Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's good. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time. And that was a lovely, open, super honest chat. So thank you so much for taking the time and being so generous with us. Really appreciate it.
Not at all. Thanks for asking. And I'm now a fan of the podcast. I've been dipping into a few of the archive. I think I'm going to have to work through all of it. Yeah.
Greg, we've got a fan.
Yeah.
We've got a fan. It's happened. It's happened.
Yeah. Ring the klaxon.
Right.
Right.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I really do. Thanks, James.
You're very welcome. Yeah.